9 minutes and 29 seconds. A moment in time now frozen. A black man in police custody struggled to breathe.
I can't breathe. Please, in the name of it.
A stunned nation gasped in utter disbelief. George Floyd's last breath touched a raw nerve. It reignited a movement.
It has been our life, and we won't stop until it matters to everybody. I am angry.
Turn your pain into action. Turn your tears into action. Turn your grief into action. We can change.
Tonight, a News 8 special presentation. The Agents of Change, turning words into action.
We must change this.
Here are News 8's Keith Kuntz and Shayna Ferreira.
Good evening. On the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, we are taking a look at the changes promised in the wake of that tragedy and the changes delivered.
So much has happened since that heart-wrenching video surfaced of Derek Chauvin kneeling on the unarmed, handcuffed black man's neck. The impact led to a racial reckoning, a nation soul-searching. In Connecticut and in around the country, George Floyd's death set off weeks of protests, young and old, black and white, marching alongside each other, turning their grief into action. I caught up with some of those demonstrators 1 year later to find out if they feel their voices were heard, what their mission is now, and the work is far from over.
The George Floyd moment was a magnifying point.
The murder of George Floyd, viewed by many as the Emmett Till of our time. Mississippi, 1955. Till, just 14 years old, was falsely accused of whistling at a white woman. The penalty, a severe beating and death by lynching. Till's killers acquitted. The young black teen became a posthumous icon of the civil rights movement.
Black lives!
Fast forward to 2021, the pain of racial injustice still cries out from Mississippi to Connecticut. A catalyst for relentless work in the pursuit for racial equity nationwide.
George Floyd took his very last breath and said, "Mama,
Come on.
I can't breathe."
Come on. Come on. Come on.
He didn't know that it would take him laying in a box dead
Come on.
before a nation called his name
Come on.
and cried out for transformation.
We caught up with a woman whose powerhouse voice shook the state in a processional honoring Floyd at the state capitol last year, Melinda Johnson.
The thought of someone dying, knowing good and well in their reality that their mother had already predeceased them, and that being the first unction of the person that you call on in your last moments of breath. I don't know anybody that wasn't shooken to their core by that reality.
Melinda and her husband, Pastor A.J. Johnson of Urban Hope Refuge Church, say the work didn't start with Floyd's murder, but it informed how they and other activists across Connecticut push forward in tangible ways.
Was that moment a catalyst? Definitely, because I think what we take for granted is that more than how much of an atrocious moment it was, something that nobody wanted to see, it was the confrontation of a reality that we no longer could deny.
Which is why she and others are advocating for equitable legislation in Connecticut.
Right now, we're fighting for racism as a public health crisis.
We believe not only in activism and organizing, but we also believe in policy.
No justice!
No peace!
No racist!
Police!
The summer of 2020, marked by stains of an ongoing pandemic and civil unrest, led activists in every corner of the state to lock arms.
Protesting is as American as cherry pie, as baseball, as football. It is the American way. And so I'd have to say that before you just stand back and you see people out here shouting, you may see anger, you may see frustration, you may see fatigue. Take a deeper look and ask yourself, well, why is that?
For Corinne Prescott of Power Up CT, the protests have transformed into advocacy and real support for her community of Manchester, like starting a community fridge and collecting sanitary napkins for those who need them most.
We started realizing there were still some things out there people needed, and so then Power CT expanded into some basic case management services, getting folks connected to services that are out there that they may not have known about.
And in New Haven, the local Black Lives Matter chapter echoing the sentiment, saying it isn't just about taking to the streets, but taking to the policies and solutions.
For myself, I'm actively creating a bunch of training spaces and workshop spaces for folks to enter into abolition work and to anti-racism, to understand what that means. We're pushing legislators to have amendments that actually name what is racism, what does it mean to be equitable, how do we push money, how do we reallocate it.
Activists using their voice in Connecticut because, as they say, it doesn't stop here.
Now it's time for people to step it up. You know, people had a fling with activism last summer.
I hope that when we look back, we make this situation more equitable for everyone. I hope that we move the needle. I hope that we do more than our ancestors have done. That is the goal, and we're all committed.
As mentioned, there is a bill on the table that would declare racism a public health crisis statewide. So why is it important to advocates? Well, according to the group Health Equity Solutions, as a result of the trauma inflicted by racism, people of color live with higher cortisol levels. Cortisol is your body's main stress hormone. Higher rates of chronic stress and disease, lower infant birth rates, and higher rates of COVID-19 infection and death. Declaring racism a public health crisis acknowledges and addresses disparities and inequities and can catalyze data and policy analysis to prevent unintentional injustices.
On a state level, the biggest change to come about out of the murder of George Floyd was the police accountability law. It's designed to significantly reform policing here in Connecticut. News 8 Chief Political Correspondent Julie Latina caught up with Waterbury's police chief to talk about how the changes are impacting his force.
Here in Waterbury, the police department has become an agent of change since pivoting after the police accountability law was passed.
We have 300 police officers here in Waterbury, so there's a lot for us to figure out on the training side of it. You know, police officers are very open to change. Police officers really don't mind being held accountable.
Chief Fernando Spagnolo says success is about relationships and transparency in the community. Detective Andrea Saunders says the force is adapting to the new law.
It's a good thing. We have body cams coming in, and I know a lot of police officers that want them, so it can tell the whole story.
Some of the other changes: intervention if a fellow officer is using force, no searches of vehicles pulled over unless there's probable cause, and officers no longer have qualified immunity and can be sued. Recently, the use of force was defined, and the law was updated to allow chokeholds if an officer or someone in the public is in imminent danger.
I think it's helpful to understand the definition of use of force and when it should be applied and how it should be applied.
Changing the face of policing also continues.
I'm still recruiting. I'm still looking into my community and having our minority recruitment, because that's important. We want the public to have people that represent them as well.
When I started this job, it was, why do you want to be in law enforcement? They're all racist. And, you know, my thing then, and is still very much now, is if you want change, you have to be the change. You have to incorporate yourself into whatever you feel the problem is and try to make change from the inside out.
As a bias and cultural awareness trainer, Sergeant Renee Harvey sees the change in Waterbury.
But when I grew up, you know, I didn't see police officers that looked like me. Right? I didn't, and if there were any, they weren't in our neighborhoods. And I grew up right here in Waterbury. As I said, it doesn't wash off. I'm still black, and I am still very much blue.
I think it's really important. It's important for growth. It's important for understanding. And it's important that we continue to change as time changes, because the expectations of us obviously change as our community differs or grows.
Now, you know, the kids that, you know, are the same age I was when I didn't see me can now see me, and they can see her. You know, and they can see him. They can see that there are people of color and there are quite a few of us here. There needs to be more of us, but there are quite a few of us here, and you know, we're making change just by being here. That's the start.
In Waterbury, Jody Latina, News 8.
Before George Floyd, there was Rodney King, and horrific brutality on display for the world to see.
It's something that my dad was never able to escape from.
Next, on the Agents of Change, Rodney King's daughter reflects on her father's legacy and the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. Plus, changemakers at the state capitol. We sit down with the leaders of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus to discuss this milestone year and their priorities in the House and Senate.
March 3rd, 1991. The nation is fixed and horrified. Painful police brutality caught on tape. Los Angeles officers armed with batons beat down a black motorist repeatedly. Rodney King's painful ordeal left an open wound and forever scarred race relations with police. The City of Angels erupted in anger. It also touched off one of the deadliest race riots in American history. 4 officers charged were later acquitted. The daughter, Rodney King, remembered that day.
It was a little shocking to me that police could do something like this. And I thought to myself, I had never seen anything like this on the TV, let alone whoever this human is. I know for sure he's dead. And then it dawned on me, looking at my family's reaction, I realized that that was my dad. And I just knew for sure he was dead. Like, I knew for sure. It's something that I think about every day. And it's something that my dad was never able to escape from. It was an endless nightmare.
How did this beating actually change your father and possibly even your relationship with your dad, you being such a young person at the time?
Well, like you and myself, any human, whether he's black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the situation, they will never be the same. Nobody can tell me that someone could be the same from this. Emotionally, physically, I mean, every way possible. In addition to, a permanent brain damage, that comes with a lot. That comes with a lot, let alone nonstop pain. My father suffered nightmares, and I was a daddy's girl. So I used to sleep with my dad, and I witnessed him have nightmares lots of nights. And it's something that no person, let alone a child, should have to experience.
Those 4 police officers with your dad, they were acquitted in the beating situation. But with George Floyd, they've gone to court. The case has come out. He was proven guilty. What was your reaction when you saw the verdict in this case?
Unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony. Find the defendant guilty. Third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act. Find the defendant guilty. Second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk. Find the defendant guilty.
I was on high anxiety alert because when we say justice, that doesn't exist when somebody's life is taken. That doesn't exist when a man is beaten to death, almost to death. My father, if he was not in the physical condition he was in that night, he would have died. And a lot of people don't know that, but he would have died. The doctors told him, we all knew it. And it's like, the only reason is because the color of their skin. That's really ignorant.
Oftentimes people will say, if they had just complied, this would not happen. When you hear that, what goes through your mind?
America would not understand because they're never feared for their life when they look in that rearview mirror. But yet and still African Americans are. And so we do things that are fight or flight situation because you know what's to come. So it's like, how do you condition yourself to die?
Lora King started the Rodney King Foundation in her father's honor. You can find out more about it on the free News 8 app.
Now to the latest on the criminal case surrounding George Floyd's death.
find the defendant guilty. His verdict
On April 20th, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all counts, including murder. A day after that verdict was read, the U.S. Attorney General announced a sweeping investigation into the practices of the Minneapolis Police Department. This probe will determine whether there is a pattern of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. On May 7th, the federal grand jury indicted 4 Minneapolis police officers on charges of violating Floyd's civil rights. Chauvin is set to be sentenced on June 25th. He faces up to 40 years in prison. His attorney has asked for a new trial claiming jury misconduct. Next March, the 3 other officers are set to go on trial in Minneapolis. Since George Floyd's murder, more than 181 black people have been killed by police in the United States. That's according to data from the research group Mapping Police Violence.
In the wake of George Floyd's death, lawmakers introduced a bill changing policing nationwide. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants in federal drug cases. It also ends qualified immunity for law enforcement, legal protection for police officers that limits victims' ability to sue for misconduct. It would also mandate data collection on police encounters and create a nationwide police misconduct registry.
Police officers who engage in extreme or severe misconduct should not be permitted to shuffle from one police department to another.
The bill passed the House. It waits a vote in the Senate.
The Black and Puerto Rican Caucus in the General Assembly was formed decades ago to increase the voice of the minority community. This year they celebrate nearly half a century in existence.
News 8's chief political correspondent Jody Latina sat down with the chair and the vice chair of the caucus to talk about their roles as agents of change.
So Representative Reyes, Representative Gibson, thank you so much for joining us today and talking with us about this awesome opportunity to be a change maker in your community. Tell me about the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. It's been around for 45 years. How has it evolved?
So the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus started in 1976. The first state representative from Hartford was Clyde Billings Jr. was the first leader of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. We believe that we are the right leaders for this organization at this time, in this pivotal time in this country when layers on the onion are being peeled back and we're being asked to be bolder, stronger, louder, and to get things done for our people.
Among the 32 members, strong female leaders.
I think in what we're seeing with the BPRC and nationally is black women getting the credit that they deserve, the recognition that they deserve, and that there's space being made, liberating space for them to show up authentically.
The caucus has 8 pillars this year under an umbrella of equity.
Where does that come in? It comes in education. It comes in environmental justice. It comes in under police accountability. It comes in under jobs. And most importantly, our top pillar is health. So if we don't figure out how to survive COVID-19 pandemic, everything else that we have as pillars won't matter.
When you think about equity, think about a race, right? And so you have a race and we're all trying to get to the finish line. Is it fair to give everyone a gallon of gas? No, because you may not need a gallon. I might need 2 gallons. He might need a half a gallon. So what's equitable, talking about equity, is giving people what they need according to where they are.
You got to be the change you want to see. And I think when you talk about change, you have to understand that people that are considered to be change agents are often people that live in uncomfortable spaces, because that really is where the growth is and where the change happens. So I want to applaud all the change agents for having the courage to stand up and be uncomfortable in that space and take that pain and turn it into power.
Pay now versus paying later. That's what equity is all about, giving people what they need to get to the finish line so we can have a better Connecticut all together. I mean, that's what we want, right? A better Connecticut. We want everyone to succeed. So a better educated, a better taken care of society is better for us all.
Thank you.
The black and brown community has been ravaged by COVID-19.
Can I give you some information? The COVID vaccine?
What's being done to convince them to get the vaccine? Plus, putting action into words.
I wanted to notify them about what was happening in the world.
Next, the young changemaker who's spreading the message of social justice by writing about it.
church was hit last year with several members of our congregation who passed away from COVID-19.
That's Pastor Christopher Reese of the Grace Baptist Church in Waterbury. He is on a personal crusade to get members of his church vaccinated. Sadly, COVID-19 has truly devastated communities of color. Hard work is underway in all of Connecticut's major cities to bring the vaccine to urban areas and make sure people are protected against this deadly virus. News 8's Lisa Carberg shows us what's being done in New Haven.
Can I give you some information?
Regarding what?
The COVID vaccine.
I don't want to be part of no trial study.
But why do you think it's a trial study?
It is. That's my opinion.
Valerie Lane Witcher doing her job as an outreach specialist with the CARE program, working to alleviate doubt over the vaccine in communities like this one on Kimberly Avenue in New Haven. Not always an easy task.
Historically, I don't trust the United States.
The CARE program is a collaboration between Southern Yale and community organizations to identify solutions to health challenges. COVID vaccinations are now the priority.
My role specifically is to go out and to inform people about the COVID vaccine, where they can get the vaccine, give them information about side effects, and just to dispel any myths, specifically with the Black and brown community.
She says they can get people right in for same-day vaccinations, breaking down barriers like lack of transportation.
Some people have had some really bad experiences with the healthcare system, and that's their truth, So just understanding that and trying to help them to know that they can advocate for themselves.
She is a tireless advocate, one person at a time.
These are the places in the city that's given the vaccine if you haven't got your vaccine yet.
CARE stands for Community Alliance for Research and Engagement. Alicia Santilli is CARE's director.
The most people that are vaccinated as possible is going to be a huge help.
Yale Dr. Arjun Venkatesh says leaders with the most powerful impact are people in the community who lead by example and get vaccinated.
It's your neighbor asking, hey, did you get your COVID shot yet? Or it's a son or daughter asking their parents, or now vice versa.
The doctor points out that everyone who's already had the vaccine had some kind of hesitancy that they had to overcome. He calls the vaccine our ticket out of this if we can all do it together. Lisa Carberg, News 8.
And when it comes to being an agent of change, there's no age requirement. A Waterbury girl wrote a book about her experience at a protest when she was just 11 years old. She's now 12, getting national recognition, making the Brass City very proud. Here's News 8's LaSalle Blanks.
Steps taken by protesters last year in Waterbury, prompting this then 11-year-old to take steps of her own.
There were people walking up in the street screaming, "No justice, no peace. Justice for Breonna Taylor, George Floyd."
The protest last summer to speak out against deadly police violence towards people of color. It was London Carter Williams' first protest. Change for her meant writing about it.
It's just easier to write than talk, in my opinion.
She became an author at age 11, writing a book for kids called Our First Protest.
Mom explained, a protest is when a lot of people come together to show others that they strongly dislike or are against an idea or event. For example, some people protest about racism or war. Today, we are protesting about racism. Black Lives Matter! I learned about that in school, that people have different skin colors, and sometimes people don't like those who are different from them, and that's wrong. I wanted to notify them about what was happening in the world and let them know that their voices can be heard no matter how young or old you are.
Her book is now in every Waterbury elementary school, and it's been flying off the shelves at Waterbury's main library downtown. Congresswoman Johanna Hayes convinced them to carry it here, saying, "So godly proud of this 11-year-old Waterbury girl for turning the most painful moments of 2020 into teachable moments for her generation." This Brass City charter school student ended up being named one of the top 30 under 30 best change makers of the year, and the youngest one by the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools.
I would like to be seeing a lot less police brutality, a lot less Black fatalities, and a lot more peace.
In Waterbury, LaSalle Blanks, News 8.
We want to thank you for watching The Agents of Change.
News 8 at 8 is coming up next.